Good afternoon, evening, everyone. I wanted to, we're a little early now, I wanted to give you a chance. Yesterday when we started this, we went right at 5:15. I wanted to give you a chance to check audio levels, get settled in, everything like that. I had a goal of starting this 5 minutes early to give that prep time. That's the plan that we're going to be, our tentative plan that we're going to be using for tomorrow is doing this type of webinar briefing after each advisory package. After this is over, I'll send out an update to our media list with the webinar registrations for each time slot, doing it at 5 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 p.m. We'll set the time as starting at the top of the hour with a plan that will start the broadcast, then give you a chance to adjust audio levels, video quality, anything like that, get a stream set up if you need, and then start the actual briefing, hurricane briefing at 5 after. So that will be the timeline that we're looking at for starting tomorrow on Friday. In the meantime, it looks like in the meantime, it looks like it's 5:15 now, so we'll get started with this briefing. We're looking at Hurricane Douglas, advisory number 15, with the forecast that was just issued at 5 p.m. Douglas has strengthened further. We were talking about rapid intensification yesterday. Douglas continued to strengthen today a bit as well. It's now a Category 4 hurricane with winds of 130 miles an hour. Right now it's located just over 1,100 miles east-southeast of Hilo and is moving to the west-northwest at 18 miles an hour. We're expecting gradual weakening with Douglas as it moves towards the state. Gradual weakening maybe beginning tomorrow and continuing through the weekend. However, Douglas could still be a hurricane as it approaches the islands. The current forecast has been very consistent, showing a track through the central part of the state, but it's important to remember not to fixate on that track itself. Our average errors 3 days out are over 100 miles, so we could see a shift either north or south of the current track. The intensity forecast is something also to keep an eye on. We've seen major hurricanes, well-formed hurricanes like this, take a longer time to weaken. The weakening will be caused first as Douglas moves over cooler water for the next couple days, and as it approaches the state, there'll be an increase in wind shear from the southwest that will disrupt the circulation. How fast that weakens can be difficult to forecast. So even though the forecast might have Douglas as a tropical storm as it moves through the state, we should prepare for hurricane force conditions in case that is slower to weaken than we expect. As far as impacts and onset timing, Douglas is a fast-moving hurricane. It's moving about 18 miles an hour now, and that speed is expected to continue over the next couple days, maybe gradually slow a bit and turn to the west 3-4 days out. However, we could see conditions beginning to deteriorate across the state as early as Saturday night. So if you need to prepare, you want to take care of that tomorrow or Saturday. You want to be done by Saturday night because conditions will deteriorate rapidly. In terms of impacts, Douglas is a major hurricane approaching the state. We should prepare for hurricane force winds that can be extremely damaging. In addition, very large surf, high seas, and surge could accompany it and impact eastern portions of the state, east-facing portions of the state. Actual areas that would fall most under the hazards would be very dependent upon the track. So if you're on an east-facing shoreline, be prepared for a surge or high surf, coastal erosion, very, very dangerous and damaging surf coming in from the east. Heavy rain is also a very big concern. We could see rainfall amounts of several inches somewhere across the state, with localized amounts into the double digits. It's too early to get very specific with those details or the areas that would be affected. That would be very dependent upon the track. A few adjustments north or south would vary who sees those largest impacts. So at this point, all residents across the state should be preparing for Hurricane Douglas and getting ready while conditions are nice across the state over the next 2 days. Remember, as this hurricane approaches, make sure you have an emergency preparedness plan for your family. Know what you're going to do, where you're going to shelter, if you're staying at home, if you're staying at a friend's, or if you're going to an emergency shelter, check with county officials to find out which shelters are being opened and when they would be open. Remember to have a hurricane preparedness kit. You want at least 14 days of food, water, medication. Also remember items that might not have been part of your hurricane kit last year that you would need to add, such as hand sanitizer, face masks. Hurricane Douglas has been on a very consistent track over the past several days. So even though the forecast hasn't changed recently, keep an eye on it over the coming days to see how the track adjusts. And as it gets closer, we'll be able to narrow down which parts of the state would be more likely to see impacts from Douglas and what those impacts may be. So with that, I think that wraps up what I wanted to cover here. Today I have a colleague of mine, Leanne Eaton, joining to help go through questions. Keep an eye on those and provide those. So Leanne, any questions? Have any questions come in?
Yeah, John, so we had one question come in earlier through email saying, given what we know now, how much rain could Oahu see from Douglas, and what's the range of winds we can expect?
We're a bit far out in time to give exact numbers or exact, we don't want people to focus too much on the exact values. Douglas has a lot of thunderstorms with them and a lot of moisture. So even outside of rainfall amounts, it's also the intensity that we have to worry about. And the storms associated with this tropical cyclone could be very intense. Even just a few inches of rain, if they fall in a very short period of time, can cause extreme flooding. We saw that actually outside of tropical season in 2018. Everybody knows with the massive flooding and damage that we had on Kauai with the record-setting rainfall, statewide record, 24-hour rainfall record. We also had some very significant flooding and a lot of damage on Oahu, in the Haina area. The rainfall amounts were much lower, but that rain occurred in a very short period of time. So it's not just rainfall amounts to focus on, but the duration and the intensity. You could see some very intense rainfall from Douglas.
So that looks like it for the questions that I can see. If anyone does have questions, please enter them into the question box and we'll address those. And now, as I was saying, that looks like we just had one coming in from HPR. Is there a time when you can get a better idea of Douglas's track and what areas will be impacted?
That's a good question. There's no sharp cutoff. As Douglas approaches, we'll be able to narrow in where it would go. This is actually a very a good forecast, or high confident forecast, I guess, compared to ones that we've had recently. We've had some very difficult forecasts and ones that weren't very well behaved tropical cyclones. In 2018, we had Lane, we had Olivia zigzagging east of the states. So as a helpful point, Douglas has been very consistent in its track, which gives more confidence as to where it's going to go. But because it's been very consistent, we know that that could still shift with time. So we don't want people to get too complacent or too comfortable and think that it won't impact them. So as we get closer in time, we'll be able to have more, be able to speak more detailed about the impacts. From a windfall standpoint, or wind standpoint as well, one benefit that we'll have coming up starting Friday evening is that the Air Force Reserve hurricane hunters will begin flying reconnaissance through Douglas, and they fly through the center, pinpoint the location and intensity, and the other thing they do is measure the wind field. They fly through all quadrants of the hurricane and will measure how far out those winds extend. And we'll get that information every 6 hours, and they'll help us refine the wind field forecast. So we'll know how far out those tropical force, storm force, or hurricane force winds extend from the center.
Great. Well, it sounds like you actually answered one of our second questions about hurricane hunters flying into the storm. We do have another question coming in about the spread of the model guidance today versus yesterday, seeming to be a little bit more split today. Is the confidence in track lower today than yesterday, or would you expect to see that type of shifting this far out from landfall?
That feeds exactly to what we were talking about before. We don't want people to get too focused on the track itself. Previously, it was very tightly clustered, and like was mentioned, today it's not. It's a little bit more spread out. There's some differences with models trending in different directions. There's no clear indicator as to which is the preferred one. The track has been, they've been spread around the same area, so the consensus of all of them has been in the same location. But with time, we could see that drift as well and that change. So that's why we want people to be aware that even though the forecast has been very similar over the last few advisories, that it still could change, and that there is still significant amount of error that's possible in the forecast this far out.
Thanks. It looks like we have one last question. Wanting to know, are there other historical analogs you compare when it comes to the size, strength, and approach to Hawaii with Douglas? Is this similar to Azelle or others?
One thing that we try to avoid making comparisons to past tropical cyclones is we don't want people to remember the conditions that they experienced. You mentioned Iselle 2014 caused a lot of damage on the Big Island when it made landfall. For reference, this track's a little bit moving actually a bit faster than Iselle did. Still from the southeast, maybe more easterly, coming in from a little bit higher latitude, but we don't want to make those similarities really, because obviously Iselle hit the Big Island, and with this track, we could see right now the track takes it between Maui and the Big Island. That could shift. It could shift south. It could shift north as well. So we don't want somebody on Maui to say here, oh, it's like this one. We didn't have impacts. We didn't have as much impact from that, or they had wind damage in the Central Valley, but not in my area. Something like that. So we try not to make comparisons to past analogs in those cases. We want people to focus on potential impacts from the approaching hurricane.
Great, and I think we have just one last question coming in. What kind of damages could we see with high winds?
Hurricane, especially as Douglas is approaching as a hurricane. Hurricane strength winds can blow down trees, blow down power lines, damage homes. That's one thing to consider when you decide what to do during, what to do during the tropical cyclone. If you stay at home, or if you go to a shelter, what sort of, what condition is your house? Is it a single wall with no hurricane clips for the roof, or tie downs to the foundation? It might be more likely to be damaged by the strong winds. Double-walled house with reinforced roof might be better to stay in. If your house isn't very safe, perhaps you have relatives or friends that you could go stay with during this weekend, during the approach. Or if you don't have any options like that, that's the point where you would consider an emergency evacuation shelter as kind of your last resort.
All right, great. Thanks, John. I think that might wrap up our question section.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Leanne. I'm trying to stay out of the sun so I'm not washed out. Sorry about that. Thank you everybody for joining us here. We had a good demo test run yesterday, trying to shake out some more items here. We're going to shoot for 15 minutes. As I mentioned at the very beginning, we'll shoot for starting the webinar broadcast, so you can see the video, check audio levels, check video quality, set up any streams. Start that at the top of the advisory hour, 5 a.m., 11 a.m., 5 p.m. And then begin this update portion where we speak about the latest forecast at 5 after. So it gives everybody 5 minutes to get ready and get adjusted. And just like today is 5:30, we'll shoot for that for no more than 15 minutes. Luckily, we got through all the questions here, but if there's too many questions or more than that, we'll try to pick the colos down so we don't go longer than 15 minutes. And I guess before I hit the 16-minute mark, I'll say thank you again very much. We appreciate your help communicating our preparedness messages with the public, and we look forward to talking to you more over the coming days. Thank you.